Today's show is gonna be great. We got a great guest lined up to help us to understand and navigate when it comes to finding the right bank online. I think in today's society, with all the technological advances, many people are spending more time banking online than ever before.
Right. And I also think that a lot of people don't really quite know how to use online checking and savings accounts. And they may be also afraid.
Right, because it's the fear of the unknown. Is it safe? How does it really work?
You're used to a brick and mortar building that you can go to, and now everything's just done online.
So we went out and found a guest by the name of Erin Lowery from BrokeMillennial.com, who is an expert when it comes to which online banks have what offers and where to go,
and
what to stay
look
away
out
from.
For.
Right.
Exactly.
So she's on the line today. So why don't we jump into the interview?
Let's get started.
Live on the line this week, we are honored to be joined by Erin Lowery from BrokeMillennial.com.
Hi, Erin.
Hi, thanks for having me.
Thanks for being on our show today.
So we saw that you wrote a great article to help out people to understand how to navigate online banking. It could be a difficult field to navigate to figure out what's the best route to go. So that's why we brought you on the show today. But before we jump into all that, can you tell us a little bit about yourself on the personal as well as the professional side?
I sure can. So I started Broke Millennial almost 2 years ago, and it's a blog I do on the side. I'm not a full-time blogger, and I live in New York City, and inspiration really for talking about financial literacy came from living in such an expensive environment. I'm only 25, and I started the blog when I was 23, and I had a lot of friends who were struggling with money and learning how to understand money. So I wanted to create just kind of a fun environment for people to be able to come to and just read funny stories and kind of get tricked into learning about finance. And then from there, I've had a lot of really great opportunities, and one of them was to join up with a company, it's a startup called MagnifyMoney.com, and that's what I do in my day job. So I wear a lot of hats because we are a startup, but I primarily do a lot of writing and editing for the blog, handle social media, pretty much anything communications relating. That's what I'm handling.
I think that when it comes to banking, we're all used to, going to a physical bank, talking to a personal banker or a teller and having our transactions done in person. So I think at times the concept of online banking or putting your money into an online establishment can be a little bit daunting and can cause some fear in some people. When it comes to online banking, can you tell me what are some pros to it?
Well, certainly one of the pros are the higher interest rates, and there are very few, if any, fees, and they offer actual overdraft protection. And the other thing too is I personally like that I can now just deposit a check from the convenience of my living room, and I don't have to go to a bank branch to get it done. I live in New York, so I don't have a car. But if I did have a car and lived somewhere where I'd have to drive to a bank, it would save gas money and my time. The thing just to remember about online banks is that because they don't have traditional brick and mortar branches, like, for example, your Chase Bank or your Wells Fargo or your Bank of America, they're making almost $1 million per bank branch in fees alone. So what these guys, these internet-only banks are doing is they're eliminating the brick and mortar establishments, and all that money that, is usually getting churned out. Granted, sorry, to backtrack a little bit, yes, it brings in a lot of revenue and fees, but at the same time, those brick and mortar branches cost a lot of money to have to the banks. So these internet-only banks are nixing that cost to them and giving it back to the consumer in the form of higher interest rates. There are no ATM fees, no overdraft fees, no monthly balances or monthly minimum balance fees, no monthly maintenance fees. That's a lot of money to the consumer's bottom line.
One of the pros that I heard you mention was overdraft. No overdraft. Can you explain that a little bit?
Sure. So there are two ways that this happens. So for example, Bank of Internet USA, they just don't have overdraft fees because if you go overdraft, they just don't let the charge go through. So you're not going to be getting dinged with a fee on the back end. Where with another option like Ally, for instance, they offer you actual overdraft protection. So if you have a checking account and you link it to a savings account, they will move money out of your savings account into your checking account to cover an overdraft fee at no charge to you. If you do anything at Bank of America will charge you $12 to move money from your savings account to your checking account, which costs the bank nothing. So internet-only banks are offering this real form of overdraft protection. Now, if you don't register for overdraft protection or you don't have money in your savings account, Ally only charges you $9 on an overdraft fee and that's one time per day. Bank of America charges you $35 per overdraft fee up to 4 times a day.
Now we talked about some of the pros to banking at online banks. What are some of the cons?
The only real con I personally see is that if you deal primarily in cash for some reason or another, if it's hard for you to get direct deposit for your job, then it can be really hard to deposit your money. You can't take a picture of cash and deposit it into the bank like you can with a smartphone to deposit a check. Now, there are some changes being made to this. For example, Capital One 360, which is Capital One's internet-only bank option, they do allow you to deposit cash at certain ATMs. They're looking to expand to all their ATMs. So that's one example of one internet-only bank. Perhaps in the next couple of years, we will see a change that they'll make it more available to deposit cash at ATMs. But for now, it's pretty hard to do.
Okay, so is the Capital 360, are they networking with brick and mortar banks who have like ATM machines? Is that how that works?
Yes.
To be able to deposit? Okay.
There are a couple traditional banks that do have internet-only options. So Charles Schwab is one, Capital One 360 is one. However, I do want to point out that's not to be confused with something like Chase Bank's online portal. So just because you can log into your bank account with Chase Bank online doesn't mean it's an internet-only bank or two separate things.
Well, and you know what? Talking back about the pros, one thing that we tell our listeners and our followers, the one thing that we like about online banking is it's very difficult. Well, I don't want to say it's very difficult, but you won't have access to your cash immediately. Usually you have to wait a good 2 or 3 days for the money to be transferred to your current local checking account. Is that the way it still works?
It does depend on the bank too. Some of them have it available pretty quickly. Others, there's a bit of a lag. So that is something that you do have to check with your specific bank. And it's good for you to know just in case for some, like say it's end of the month, you're running low, your direct deposit's coming in at a certain time, but your gym membership charge is going to be coming the day before, making sure that it's not going to force you overdraft because there's potential for that lag. Something you need to research when you're looking into which bank to sign up with.
And the reason why we said that it was one of the pros was because, especially if you're trying to save, or for some people, they have a very difficult time for building a savings account or building any type of money if they have easy access to it. So we usually then tell people, well, try an online bank. But now it looks like more and more people are using online banking for their everyday needs. Like it's almost like their main checking account. Is that what you find as well?
Yeah, I think that it is becoming more and more that way just because there's been such a long history of banks mistreating their customers and people are sick of it. And this is offering a really competitive way to not be hit with fees all the time, to have higher interest rates, and it's generally easier. It's nice to be able to just snap a picture of your check and deposit it instead of having to go down to the bank.
And can you talk about even these online banking, how they're insured as well too? I think that can be a fear to a lot of people. They may feel like, well, I don't know, what if that company folds? I won't be able to get my money because I can't go to an actual bank or actual location.
Absolutely. Well, first thing people need to understand is that just because you deposit your money at the bank does not mean it's actually housed in a safe at that bank. The bank uses this money to loan out to people, to lend. It's not in a huge warehouse somewhere at the bank. So in that sense, it's really no different than the brick and mortar. But the other thing to know is that all of these, the Ally, Bank of Internet USA, Charles Schwab, Cap One 360, they are all FDIC insured, just like your traditional brick and mortar branches. That's just one thing that you do need to check before you sign up with any bank is to make sure it has FDIC insurance so your money is protected up to $200,000.
What's your experience with some of the customer service? If someone is having an issue, do these online banks, do they respond quick enough to people's needs?
Sure. So I personally have been using USAA for 8 years. I've used them online banking since 2007. I've never had the traditional brick and mortar. Actually, since I went to college, because USAA was one of the first internet-only banks. And I love them. I cannot say enough good things about their customer service. I've never once had an issue. It's all stateside, so you don't have any sort of issue with getting routed to somebody that you can't necessarily understand or that can't directly help you with your issue. And I've also had experience calling Ally's customer service line. Again, exact same thing. Ally is actually available 24/7. You can call anytime if you have an issue. I've never had a big wait. I think my boss actually uses Ally, and he was telling me in their app, they show you what the wait time is for a customer service person. So if you want to call, but you see that the wait's 10 minutes, you can wait to see until that time goes down. and then call in and directly get connected with someone.
I know that you touched on this a little bit, but can you expound again? Because I'm sure there's someone out there is listening saying, okay, how can I actually get put my money in an online bank?
Sure.
Like in regards to depositing, whether it be direct deposit, or what if they don't have direct deposit?
So if you don't have a direct deposit option from your employer, you get a physical paper check. You need to have a smartphone or access to a scanner. Smartphones are pretty much the way that most people do it, but you download an app that's associated with your bank. You'll log in through the app. So I will say that I recommend only logging in when you're on a secured wireless network. So basically when you're at home on password protected Wi-Fi. That's just general good practice anytime you log into financial information. So you log in through the app, and then it will just have somewhere within the app that you want to make a mobile deposit. You click that, open it up. It takes a shot of the front of your check, flip it over where you've signed it and endorsed it, takes a picture of the back of the check. You type in how much the check is worth. You hit the button to cash it in. They verify the check and the routing number, and it gets deposited directly into your bank account.
Erin, I think that, a lot of people, they watch the news, and it seems like almost every week some company has compromised our information, and identity theft is just on the rise like at no other time in history. I mean, even us, we've been some people have tried to hit us up, and we had to get identity theft protection and all of that. So with identity theft on the rise, is online banking safe?
Yes, I would say it absolutely is safe. Again, it is FDIC insured. If your identity is compromised, especially if somebody gets a hold of your social security information, your brick and mortar bank is just as vulnerable as an internet only bank. If somebody truly 100% steals your identity, they can go after whether or not it's online. So you just basically need to be proactive about protecting yourself. Always log in on a secured network. Never share your password or your PIN with anyone. And so no, banking online doesn't make you any more susceptible than people who are using traditional bank branches.
And I do know from, being in the banking field for many years that a lot of banks spend a lot of money in their software, their internet software, to make sure that, not to say that no one can get into it, but they put a lot of money into making sure that it's at its safest or secure. So I'm sure that the online banking, they do the same exact thing.
Absolutely. There's so many bit encryptions and everything just to make sure that you are safe, the customers are protected. Trust me, they don't want to lose your money any more than you want it lost.
Thank you so much for taking us through the steps on how you can deposit money to an online bank. Also, can people deposit cash? And if so, how? And how can they also withdraw their money from the bank?
So the depositing cash is pretty tricky. I actually have never tried to do it myself. My understanding is that you could just go get a cashier's check, or you could go to a cash deposit place. I think with USAA, there are certain, and I know this sounds weird, but it's like certain UPS or FedEx stores that you can go in and actually deposit cash with them, and somehow they have the connection to USAA. I know that sounds really bizarre, but I remember that from when I first moved to New York, and I was making some money in babysitting, and I didn't want it just sitting in my room. But the other thing, and like I said, Capital One 360 is making some of their ATMs available to deposit cash. But frankly, if you have hundreds and hundreds of dollars in cash that you don't want laying around your house, then it does make sense to keep a traditional brick and mortar bank branch simply for depositing cash, at least while we're in this phase of trying to figure out how they can deposit cash. In terms of getting your money out, very, very easy. Just go to an ATM. Or, of course, if you're going to like a Rite Aid, CVS, or your grocery store, if they do cash back, you can always get it there. Now, I'm sure people are automatically thinking, what about ATM fees? Fortunately, a lot of these internet-only banks do not charge ATM fees. And on top of that, they will reimburse you if you do get charged an ATM fee. Now, that doesn't speak for all internet-only banks, so you do have to check their fee tables and see if that's one of the options. But USAA, for example, which you do have to have a military affiliation to be a member, but USAA reimburses up to $15 of ATM fees. Ally reimburses everything. Bank of Internet USA reimburses everything. So let's say that you need money real quick. Bank of America branch is on the street corner. You walk in there, withdraw cash. They tell you they're going to charge you $3. It's okay. You accept it. And Bank of Internet USA actually reimburses you the next day. Ally will reimburse you at the end of a monthly cycle.
And is that something that is done automatically, or do you need to contact their customer service department?
Nope, it's done absolutely automatically. And then most of these banks also do have a network of ATMs. For example, perhaps the Allpoint ATM machines You could, and those are, you often see them in convenience stores like a 7-Eleven, and you can use that and it won't charge you a fee on either end.
Can we back up to when you were talking about pros? One of the pros that you mentioned was the higher interest rates. Is it a big stark difference between the type of interest you can earn at an online bank versus a brick and mortar traditional bank?
So it doesn't sound dramatic when you say it, but when you break down the numbers, it can be. So for example, your big name banks, your Chases, your Wells Fargos, your Bank of Americas, they're offering you a 0.01% interest rate on your savings account. That is essentially a free loan to the bank. Now, if you're with Ally, for instance, they offer 0.9. So both of these are less than 1%. But if you have $5,000 in savings with Ally, you're making $45 a year in interest. If you have the same amount with Bank of America, you're making 50 cents.
Nice.
Wow.
So for those that are listening that like what you're saying, and again, we're talking with Erin Lowery from BrokeMillennial.com. If they hear what you're telling us and they want to investigate for themselves about finding the right online bank, what are some things that we should look out for when we're trying to find the right one?
First of all, check out their fees. If you're switching over to an internet-only bank, that's one of the things that you really want the protection for. You don't want to be getting charged overdraft fees. You don't want to be paying ATM fees. You want to have those higher interest rates. So figure out which one of those are going to give you the best deal, especially if you're someone who perhaps has had issues with overdraft in the past because maybe you're forgetful and you forgot to transfer some money out of savings and you got whacked with that fee. Or perhaps every so often you're just running short on cash at the end of the month. You do need to figure out what's best for you. I personally just really like checking out the high interest rates because it means a lot to me to make $45 instead of 50 cents. I think that's a meaningful amount of money.
Oh, yeah.
And the other thing is, of course, make sure that it's FDIC insured so that you do have that extra layer of protection.
Are there any online banks that you would personally recommend to our listeners?
Well, I have been singing the praises of USAA, so if you have
USAA.
access, I'm a big fan. However, do know that some of their fee tables are not as strong. So if you do have a tendency to go overdraft, they are a bit more like a traditional bank, and they'll whack you with the overdraft charge. So just be careful about that. Ally Bank and Bank of Internet USA are both accounts that I would absolutely recommend people checking out. The only kind of negative about Bank of Internet is that their interest rates on their savings account isn't quite as high, but their checking account is a little bit better than Ally's because it doesn't have fees. So if you want to split and do savings with Ally and checking with Bank of Internet USA, that's fine. But if you want it all in one location, just keep in mind if you do tend, either to go overdraft, Internet USA is a little bit better, but if you want the higher savings rate, Ally is better. So you just have to figure out what's best for you.
Are there some online banks out there that maybe we should stay away from?
I am not a fan of when the internet-only banks treat fees just like the brick and mortar. And one of the one that I would point out is Everbank. That's EVER Bank. They charge $30 per overdraft fee, which is just on par with the big guys. And I don't even think there's a cap. So if you went overdraft, 7 times in a day at $30 per fee, that's a huge chunk of change. And the other thing that two other points I would like to make here is just be absolutely sure that you're not confusing online banking with internet-only banks. So just because your Chase Bank has that online portal, you are not banking with an internet-only bank. The terms kind of get used. A lot of people call internet-only banks online banks, so it can get a little confusing. Just look and make sure that these internet-only banks don't have a bunch of branches, they're not charging a bunch of fees. That's really how you're going to be able to tell the difference. And the other thing is watch out for those, quote, eye-popping deals. If someone's saying that they're offering you 5% interest rate, and that seems really like it's too good to be true, it probably is. And that's probably because there are 20,000 hoops that you have to jump through in order to obtain that 5% interest. And it's probably hoops like 12 charges on your debit card and 10 charges on your credit card, and you have to have at least $500 minimum balance in your account. Don't mess around with things like that. Just go with, find the ones like the Ally with the 0.9 or My Savings Direct with the 1.05 and stick your money there.
I got to say, a few years back when Ty and I first got married, we jumped on an online bank. It was ING Direct because they had, these great rates, like 3%, crazy stuff like that. I mean, are those days over?
They might come back, but for now, a lot of them are. And the other thing to remember is a lot of times, if you're getting acquired as a new customer, the guys that work in acquisition at the bank are able to offer you all those great deals. because they're kind of putting the screws to the current customers. So the current customers get charged all those fees so that the acquisition guys can go out and recruit customers by offering those, $100 to open a bank account or crazy high interest rates. So just kind of something to keep in mind that with banking, often loyalty doesn't pay. So as soon as you start feeling like you're getting mistreated by your bank, it's time to switch.
Are there any resources out there that people can use when trying to find a great online bank?
Yes. So instead of just blindly Google searching this, because it really can get overwhelming, I would recommend anybody go to magnifymoney.com. So magnify like a magnifying glass. It's a company that I work for, and we compare tons of financial products, but notably checking and savings accounts. And we do this based on transparency and simplicity. So we're not getting kickbacks from the bank to tell you what's best. We're actually telling you what's best based on what the banks are offering. So you can customize information, like you can put in your zip code, you can put in how much you tend to keep in checking, you can let us know if you tend to go overdraft, and then it'll aggregate what the best deals are for you and what we think will match your financial situation.
And all this can be done for free, right?
Absolutely. It doesn't cost anything.
Great. We'll definitely put that in the show notes, a link to the website, Magnify Money.
If people wanted to stay connected with you, Erin, how would they do so?
There are a few different ways. You can always check out my blog, which is Broke Millennial. I know millennial sounds hard. It's MILLENNIAL. But if you just type it into Google and screw up the spelling, it'll still find me. And you can also find me on Twitter at Broke Millennial. And then again, I'm also writing at magnifymoney.com. And you could also follow Magnify on social media at magnify_money on Twitter.
Erin Lowery from BrokeMillennial.com. Thank you so much for taking out some time to help us understand how internet-only banking works.
Thank you, Erin.
Thank you so much for having me.
There you have it, ladies and gentlemen. Everything that you need to know to make an informed decision when it comes to choosing the right online bank.
Did you hear when she said that she has been using online checking and savings account for years?
Yeah.
Like that's all she does. She even makes her deposits and everything.
I think she gave some great advice and some great leads as to, which banks to kind of pursue and investigate, because there's so many online banks out there that you can kind of be overwhelmed into trying to find the right one. And that's a great resource that she introduced with Magnify Money, which is a free website where you can go and enter the things that you're looking for, and it kind of narrows the list down for you based on your needs. So I definitely recommend Magnify Money. It's free and it helps navigate all these online banks out there. I think that there's a lot to be gained. I mean, you heard the interest rate difference? I mean, you're getting nothing. You're getting nothing at these brick and mortar banks. You're not getting. It's not like you're going to get rich off the interest online either. But I mean, if your money's going to sit, whether it's a savings account or a sinking fund or something, why not get the maximize the interest earnings that you can receive?
And keep in mind that a lot of online banks also waive extra fees, such as ATM fees, if you have to use their non-bank ATM. So that's good to know as well.
I think the online banks have really stepped their game up from the, back when we first started. We started with ING, and there have been a lot more banks to pop up with a lot more perks. So I think it's definitely worth investigating, especially if you're the type of person that has difficulty with keeping money in your savings account because it's so easily accessible. Maybe you want to hide a little bit of that online just to keep it safe and out of your way. Well, that does it for this episode of the His and Her Money Show.
Don't forget to visit us over on our website at hisandhermoney.com, where we share a ton of information to help you manage your money and win with your finances.
You can tweet us at hisandhermoney. So be sure to catch us on Twitter. Here it is. No matter where you are on the road to financial freedom, the key is to start now
and finish strong.